Hello everybody, my name is Exony, and today I wanted to talk to you about the Scout's melee arsenal, the problems that it suffers from, and how they can be remedied. First off, let's establish what the main problem is with the majority of Scout melee weapons. Much like most all melee weapons for all the classes, they can never stand up to the damage output of the primaries, or even secondary weapons, especially on the Scout, who, by the time he's within melee range, can choose to pull out one of his various bats and go for those sweet 35 damage swings, or you could instead just shoot them for upwards of 100 damage with your scattergun. I don't know about you, but I'd take the scattergun shot any day of the week over the chance at a melee hit. And this is where the major problem lies. Many of Scout's melees are balanced around some sort of melee gimmick, and they're vastly outshined by melee weapons that offer a utility or movement options, specifically the Boston Basher and the Atomizer. The Boston Basher shines for being able to build Uber with your medic in a more organized environment, while the Atomizer's third jump is still godly even after nerfing it. While on the other end of the spectrum, we have something like the Sun on a Stick or the Fan of War, which both benefit the player in some small way, Sun on a Stick's flame resistance, and the Fan of War being able to mark enemies for death, and while both of these do have utility uses, they're not nearly useful enough to validate them over other choices. And this is the major problem. Melee weapons being designed and balanced with small utility upsides along with melee gimmicks that will never have as good damage output as primary or secondary weapons, and also not having the pure utility use of other melee options. And now that I've managed to complain for a minute about the general design of melee weapons, how would I suggest that we alleviate these problems? To put it simply, they need to be made to focus more on their utility than on some damaging gimmicks. I'm not going to talk about each weapon, as some are meant to be a joke, like the Holy Mackerel, and some like the Sandman sit in very odd spots, but I will talk about 3 weapons in particular that could really see some use if they just got some TLC and some retuning. The biggest offender of the melee problem is the Sun on a Stick, a weapon I've been using in pubs a lot since the Jungle Inferno update to try and escape from the Pyro Legions, and the only thing I can say about it is that it's underwhelming. Its utility of 25% reduced fire damage is nice, but having to whip the thing out to gain its slight benefit is useless if you're being walked at by a pyro, and it isn't worth its weight when it comes to negating afterburn. I would suggest that its flame resistance be persistent as long as the item is equipped, but seeing how the Valve balancing team doesn't seem to like gaining permanent beneficial effects just for having a weapon equipped, I would instead suggest increasing its flame resistance while drawn, maybe to 50%, or ignoring afterburn, so that you don't kill a pyro then die 2 seconds later to some stray flames that happen to catch you. Another melee weapon I have a huge problem with, and probably one of my least favorite items in all of Team Fortress 2, is the Candy Cane, which, while having one of the most incredible upsides of any Scout weapon, also has one of the harshest downsides. A simple 25% damage vulnerability to explosives may not seem like much on paper, until you realize that means being one-shot by demo men and soldiers, and you may start to reconsider your options. Creating health packs is incredibly powerful, but it won't do much for you if you happen to eat a stray pipe. I would suggest lowering its damage vulnerability to explosions to 20%, to put grenades and rockets just under an insta-kill threshold, while still heavily discouraging Scouts from engaging in direct fights with explosive classes, and forces the Scout to find alternate paths to avoid spam. Next up, we would look at the Rap Assassin, which while I believe is a pretty decent melee, it encourages a use then forget it style of play. To explain, there is no downside to using this melee and just throwing it into a choke point every now and then. There's no aim involved most of the time, and it doesn't matter if you hit anything or not. It probably won't kill them anyway, and any poor player walking through that choke point, bleed isn't fun to deal with, and it just feels dirty. You never think to yourself, man, that Scout randomly throwing his ball really had to try, put himself in some sort of risk, and aim to get me, because it doesn't require any of those things. Looking at you, Sandman, I would suggest that maybe your ball doesn't recharge at all, and instead can only be recovered by running over and picking it up, dealing damage like with the Gas Passer, or visiting a resupply cabinet. Maybe buff its damage as well, as you would have it much less often, and it would actually be rewarding instead of a minor annoyance to both players. Melee weapons across all classes in TF2 suffer from these same problems, being balanced as damage-dealing devices when they are greatly overshadowed by the class's primary or secondary options, leaving only 1 or 2 options for every class. Most soldiers would never choose the equalizer over the escape plan, in the same way a pyro will rarely use the third degree, which is a straight upgrade over the stock fire axe, instead of using the power jack. There are exceptions to this, of course, Things like the Market Gardener are interesting and skill-demanding examples that offensive melee weapons can be useful and rewarding, but they're few and far between, especially on a class like the Scout, who already excels at close-range combat with his primary weapons. Melee weapons need to focus more on utility. Remember though that this is all just wishful thinking. I don't expect any of these changes to happen anytime soon, if ever, but I just wanted to sit down and talk with you about it. So if you have any ideas about Scout melees, or melees in general, leave a comment down below. I love hearing what you guys have to think. Also, I know it's been a while since my last video, but I'm finally settling into a nice schedule with my new job and school, so hopefully no more month-long gaps in between videos. Enough about me though. I hope you have a great day, and peace out.